Hello everyone, this is Haley Ashcroft. This is my teaching presentation about multidimensional arrays. To start off, I'll just give a brief overview of what arrays are. I'm sure you guys have used them before, we have in this class. An array stores multiple values in one single variable. It's a single list of key value pairs, and if you want to use a value within an array, you have to access the value using its index number. So if you have an array with 3 different values, the first value will always start with an index of 0. That's important to remember. So this is an example of a basic array. So we have the variable name is equal to an array with 3 different values: Steve, Chad, and Phil. And using an echo statement that we have shown below, we can create a sentence that pulls out these different names of pugs using their index number. So if we wanted to pull out the name Steve, then we'd use the variable pugs is equal to the index of 0 because it's the first value of the array. So what are multidimensional arrays? They're definitely more advanced. Just like the name suggests, it contains one or more dimensions, obviously. But what are dimensions? Dimensions refer to the number of indices you need to select an element. And now you're asking, what are indices? Indices is just the plural form of index. So in other words, dimensions refers to the number of index numbers that you need to select an element. So I'll just go back here for a second. If we wanted to select Steve, we would have variable pugs, and then we would, right after that, put in brackets the index number of that value. If we had a second level of arrays, we would need to add another index number off here to the side. This is what a two-dimensional array looks like. We have our variable name is equal to an array, and within this red array we have 3 different pink arrays. In other words, there are 2 levels, an array within an array. Thus it's called two-dimensional. To take it a step further, this is what a 3-dimensional array looks like. It's very similar to the last one, except now we've added another level of purple arrays here, which are within the pink ones. So a 3-dimensional array is an array within an array within an array. Most people don't go past 3 because it starts to get really complicated. So 2 is typically the max, 3 is very rare, and anything past that just gets really confusing. So for the remaining examples, we'll be using this basic chart that we have here. So it's a chart featuring the names of pugs, what these pugs are wearing, and how old they are. We'll be using multidimensional arrays to pull out these different values and create sentences with them. So you guys will see how we'll do that here with the remaining slides. But this is an example of a multidimensional array with the information from the chart plugged into it. So we have our variable pugs is equal to an array that contains 3 different arrays. So you'll notice here, if we go back to the chart, actually we'll go back to the other slide. We have this variable pugs equals the red array. The red array here that contains all these other ones is functioning as this entire chart. So it's saying this entire chart holds all of these pieces of information, these different arrays. And each of these pink arrays are going to list the name of the pug, its corresponding outfit, and its corresponding age. You'll notice that each array is referencing a row in our table. That's important to remember. So we've built this array. Now the question is, how do we use it? How do we pull out these different values? If we wanted to know how old Steve is, and we wanted to know what Steve is wearing, or we wanted to know how old Phil is, we would need to point to the 2 indices, or in other words, the row and column, or these 2 different index numbers to gain access to each element. We can also use a for loop, and I'll talk about how we can use those here at the end. So we started off building our array that we have here, and we can add on this code here to pull out the different values. Again, we're using this echo statement that you guys hopefully recognize from the first example of basic arrays, except it's a little bit different. We have our variable pugs, the first index number and the second index number. So now we have two levels of index numbers, or in other words, two dimensions. So with this code, you can tell right away that we have an array with two dimensions. It has two different levels. So I want you guys to take a look at this right here, this variable. What is this referencing? So we have variable pugs, so we're referencing that entire array. If we go back here, we're referencing this entire array. And we're looking at the first index. We're looking at index 0, which is going to be the first value within that array. So each of these arrays functions as a different value. So if you had index 0, we're looking at this first array here. Okay, so we've identified what that first index number means. The second index number, index 1, if we come back to this screen, index 1 is going to be the value within this array. So index 1, you'll remember, since index 0 is actually number 1, index number 1 is going to be value number 2. So that'll be bow tie. So this entire variable here is pulling out the value called bow tie. You can see that these are the sentences that those echo statements construct. So the first one, Steve is wearing a bow tie and is 2 years old. So it pulled bow tie using that variable name. You can also use a for statement. This one is a little bit more succinct. You'll notice it has variable row and variable call, and those variables would have to be declared before you can use them in a for statement. But I guess it just depends on your preference about which one you wanted to use. You're more than welcome to pause the video and look at how this for statement is constructed. But what this for statement does is it cycles through both sets of arrays and then outputs. It outputs a table looking layout with all the information, and the result would look like this. So again, you're welcome to pause and look at that and see how that would work. Maybe you prefer using a for statement, but you have two options available to you on how you can pull out different values from multidimensional arrays. So my last question is, when do you use it? If you have a table of information with multiple columns and rows, multidimensional arrays become incredibly useful. So that is one of the main reasons why you would use it. If you also need to store values with more than one key, which is basically what I just said, then it's also incredibly beneficial as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is over 7 minutes, but hopefully this made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the discussion board, and I'll try and get back with you as quick as I can. Thank you so much.